All right, welcome everyone. We're diving deep today, exploring a book a lot of you have been requesting, Banana Yoshimoto's Kitchen.
Ah, yes, Kitchen. Two novellas, really. Kitchen, of course, and then there's Moonlight Shadow.
Exactly. We're going to try and unpack both of those. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I think it's important to lay out the basics. We're dealing with a translated work here.
Right, originally published in Japan back in '88, then hit the English-speaking world in '93. Kitchen, the first novella, actually snagged a pretty big award.
Yeah, the Kind New Writer Prize. So we're dealing with something special right off the bat. And speaking of starting strong, let's talk about Mikage, our narrator in Kitchen.
Oh, she's something else, isn't she?
What really struck me was her connection to kitchens. I mean, this is way beyond just liking to cook, right?
Primal, almost.
Exactly. She finds comfort, solace, almost like the kitchen is a living thing for her. I mean, she even talks about wanting to die in a kitchen.
That's heavy stuff. I think that speaks to the kitchen as, like you said, more than just a room. It's where we nourish ourselves, find warmth, maybe even a sense of control in a world that feels out of control.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
Especially after losing her grandmother, the woman who raised her. I mean, she can't even sleep anywhere but next to the fridge.
Right. It's like the kitchen holds this echo of her grandmother, the fridge humming away. It's almost a stand in.
Until reality sets in, of course. She can't stay in that apartment forever.
And finding a new place while you're grieving, that's rough.
And then, boom,
Mm.
enter Yuichi Tanabe, someone she met in her grandmother's funeral, with this out-of-nowhere invitation to stay with him and his mother.
I gotta say, her reaction to Yuichi is intense. She uses words like bewitched, possessed. It's more than just convenience, right?
Totally. Like she's drawn to him, or the idea of what he represents, this escape, maybe, a
Yeah.
chance to not be alone.
Yeah, like in that moment of vulnerability, he's this unexpected lifeline.
So she goes to their apartment. And, no surprise, the kitchen grabs her attention right away. She loves it. It's well made, organized. Then she meets his mother, Eriko.
Eriko. So striking. Right.
Beautiful, Mikage calls her.
Mm-hmm.
And then comes the curveball.
Hmm.
Yuichi just casually mentions Eriko had plastic surgery.
Just drops it in there.
Throws you off a little, doesn't it? Makes you think about how we see ourselves, how we present ourselves. Like, Mikage even admits she was wondering why they didn't look more alike.
It gets under your skin a bit, like what's real, what's constructed. Even within families, those lines can blur.
And yet, Mikage finds herself at home in this unconventional setup. She's drawn to the kitchen, sure, but also their sofa. There's this sense of belonging.
It's fascinating. They're all kind of living their own lives on their own schedules, barely crossing paths sometimes, but there's this unspoken acceptance holding them together.
Right. Eriko even tells Mikage she can stay as long as she wants.
Like, indefinitely. It's not your typical family unit, but it works for them.
Then we get a blast from the past, Mikage's ex-boyfriend, Sotaro. And he's surprised to find her living with Yuichi and his, quote, weird mother.
That weird says a lot, doesn't it?
It points to this contrast in Mikage's life, the stability she had with Sotaro versus the unusual, almost whimsical nature of the Tanabes.
Like her needs have changed. What she once valued, maybe that robustness she mentions, isn't what she's looking for anymore. Now it's about this strange cheerfulness, this tranquility she finds with them.
And the book drops all these little hints about her staying long-term, like the Tanabes constantly buying new electronics, Yuichi suggesting she sends out change of address cards. But Mikage, she's still wrestling with actually making the move, making it permanent.
It's that push and pull, isn't it? She's found this haven with the Tanabes, but there's that part of her holding on to the past, to her life with her grandmother.
And it all comes to a head when she finally moves out of her old apartment. She's carrying the last of her stuff, and instead of feeling relieved, she's shaky, almost in tears. Then she just turns around and goes back to the Tanabes.
Powerful moment. Shows how deep that connection's gotten. It's not just a place to stay anymore, it's where she feels she belongs.
And that's even more clear after the dream she has about her old kitchen. It's got that yellow-green floor she hated. But Yuichi's there, cleaning it, make it nice.
Like he's tending to her past, to her memories.
And get this, Yuichi tells her he had a similar dream. He was craving ramen in her old apartment, even remembered that yellow-green floor.
Wow.
It's like they're linked on this subconscious level, sharing these dreamlike moments. What's Yoshimoto doing with that, do you think?
It's almost like she's saying there's more to connection than we can explain. These shared dreams, it's like their emotions are resonating, blurring the lines between them.
But then we get this very down-to-earth advice from Eriko. She tells Mikage that if she wants to understand her own limits, She needs to take care of something, like kids or even houseplants.
It's so insightful. Eriko sees that Mike is kind of adrift, unsure of her place, and taking care of something else that can help you figure out your own capabilities, your own boundaries.
It makes you think. And then, out of nowhere, this huge blow. Eriko is murdered. Just like that.
It's brutal.
Yushi calls Minkage, and it's just devastating. You can hear the pain in his voice. And without hesitation, she goes right to him.
Shows how much they've come to rely on each other, like in this moment of absolute grief, they need each other.
Yuichi tells her he feels like an orphan. It's raw, honest. And then there's this brief moment of dark humor, which feels so human amidst all the sadness.
Mhm.
And then Eriko's will.
Oh man, her will, as unique as she was.
Addressed to Yuichi, but there's this warm message for Minkage in there, and even a funny request thrown in.
Even in death, Eriko's personality shines through, and the smell of her perfume lingering in the apartment, it adds to that bittersweet feeling.
So Minkage and Yuichi, they fall into this quiet routine after Eriko's death. They're both orphans now, in a way, sharing their grief, finding comfort in just being together.
It's a turning point for Makage. She starts working as a cooking assistant and finds this unexpected sense of accomplishment in it.
Right. And she makes all these observations about how different people are, how they view happiness in life. It's like she's trying to make sense of it all, especially after everything she's been through.
She remembers a summer from her past when she was truly happy in a kitchen, and it seems to give her this resolve to live fully with this awareness of how fragile life is.
We see them going about their lives, grocery shopping,
Yeah.
making these elaborate international dinners. It's like they're clinging to some kind of normalcy, avoiding the elephant in the room.
It's a safe space, their shared routine, but you can feel the weight of their unspoken grief, the questions hanging in the air.
And it all spills out, finally. Yuichi confesses he's been drinking, that he couldn't bring himself to call her. And then he asks her to move back in.
That raw honesty fueled by alcohol, maybe, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And their conversation after that, it's charged, ambiguous. What does the future hold for them? Neither of them seems to know.
It's a turning point. He's laying his feelings bare, his need for her, and she's grappling with her own feelings, her own uncertainties.
There's this powerful image, them looking into this metaphorical cauldron of hell together, side by side, but still separate. It's like they're in this together, but also on their own paths.
And then, despite all that, Maikit goes ahead with her work trip to Izu.
It's like she needs space, some time to think.
To process everything that's happened, her feelings for Yuichi.
But then she gets this call from his ex-girlfriend, full of accusations. It throws her off balance, as this whole other layer of messiness.
Talk about bad timing. She's already in turmoil, and this just piles on.
She goes back to her own apartment to pack for Izu, and it's chaos, reflecting how jumbled up she feels inside. But then she just craves tea. And that leads to this unexpected moment with Yuichi.
At that quiet little cafe, a real turning point.
Yuichi finally breaks down, confesses how lost he feels,
Yeah.
and she comforts him. It's this genuine connection, raw and vulnerable.
It's like they finally move past that wall of unspoken grief. They see each other's pain and they let each other in.
Even small things become loaded, like Yuichi opening the car door for her. And Mikic gets hit with this unexpected jealousy, realizing how deep her feelings for him actually run.
It shows how complex their relationship is. They're grieving, they're finding comfort in each other, but there's also this romantic tension bubbling under the surface.
Their goodbye is bittersweet, filled with all these unspoken emotions. And then, before Mikic leaves for Izu, she remembers a story about Eriko buying a pineapple plant for her wife during a tough time.
Ah, that story. A little reminder of Eriko's past as a man.
Right. It's like Yoshimoto wants us to remember that identity is fluid, that love and family can exist outside of the traditional boxes.
It adds another layer to Eriko and to her acceptance of Minkage.
And that's reinforced when Mikic talks to Chika, a friend of Eriko's from the club. Chika's worried about Yuichi, and she confirms that, yes, Eriko was a man.
It gives us this outside perspective on their unique family dynamic, the bond they shared, and it highlights the struggles Yuichi might face now that he's lost that anchor in his life.
So, Makesh finally goes to Izu, feeling this mix of freedom and this nagging awareness of her connection to Yuichi. He's still on her mind, even with the distance.
It shows how deeply their experiences have intertwined. Even as she tries to create space, their bond remains.
And that late-night phone call she makes to him at the end, it's awkward, stilted. Yuichi talks about these boring tofu meals he's been eating.
Yeah.
You can tell he wants to be alone with his grief.
He's seeking refuge in isolation, even if it means a bland diet.
But my Gage, she can't let him go. She decides to bring him katsudon, and I mean, she goes all out. This whole journey ending with her climbing onto the Im's roof.
Talk about determination. She's literally going above and beyond to reach him, to pull him back from the brink of despair.
She finds him in his room, and they share another dream, this time about her old kitchen. That recurring motif of their connection, it's almost spooky.
It's like they're tapping into something beyond words, beyond the conscious mind.
And then she offers him the katsudon, this simple act of care.
A symbol of nourishment, both physical and emotional. She's saying, I see you, I care about you.
And surrounded by all these memories, they talk. Mikage begs him not to disappear into his grief, tells him she wants to face the future with him whenever he's ready.
It's vulnerable, honest. She's putting her heart out there despite the uncertainty.
And Yuichi, he just thanks her for the katsudon.
Mhm.
They have this little exchange about her trying to act tough, and there's this glimmer of hope of something new forming between them.
Yeah, like a shift in their dynamic. They're starting to be more open with each other, more playful even.
She goes back to the inn, and the weather's changed. The skies are clear. It's like this reflection of the shift inside her.
Beautiful imagery. The outer world mirroring her inner state.
And then, bam, it hits her again. The reality of Eriko's absence. It's a gut punch.
Grief comes in waves, doesn't it?
Back in Tokyo, she gets a call from Yuichi. He's happy, he's coming back. They make plans to meet. It's a hopeful ending, even if it's still bittersweet.
They've been through so much, but there's a sense of optimism, a new beginning.
Now, on to Moonlight Shadow, the second novella. This one deals with loss in a different way. We meet Satsuki, who's reeling from the death of her boyfriend, Hitoshi, in an accident.
And it's even more complicated because his girlfriend, Yumiko, died in the same accident.
Right, a double loss.
Yeah.
And there's this small bell Hitoshi always carried, a gift from Satsuki before they were even dating. It becomes this powerful symbol of their relationship.
It's a tangible reminder of him, of what she's lost.
For months after his death, she goes to the bridge where they used to meet, drinks tea, and just remembers. She's plagued by insomnia, waking up to that painful realization that he's gone. She starts running to cope.
The bridge becomes this sacred space for her, filled with memories. And running, it's a way to channel that grief, to find some control when everything else feels chaotic.
And one morning, on her run, she meets this mysterious woman named Urara on the bridge. Urara asks these strange questions and tells Satsuki she has something to show her.
Urara's entrance is so intriguing. She brings this element of mystery, of the unknown, into Satsuki's world of grief.
Urara eventually tells Satsuki her name and confirms she'll show her something, but it's all very cryptic. Later, Satsuki runs into Hiragi, Hitoshi's younger brother, and he's wearing Yumiko's school uniform.
A sailor-style uniform, no less. It's unsettling, but also kind of heartbreaking. You see how deep his grief is and how he's expressing it in this unconventional way.
Satsuki can't shake that image of Urara, her expression, the promise of something to see. And they meet again. And Urara tells Satsuki to come back to the bridge at a very specific time.
It creates this sense of anticipation, like something magical is about to happen.
Urara says Satsuki might see a vision connected to the river. She talks about needing the right conditions, about a deep connection between Satsuki and the river itself.
It blends reality with the supernatural so seamlessly, it makes you think about those connections we can't always explain, especially between the living and the dead.
Satsuki remembers her last conversation with Hitoshi before the accident, how his black jacket disappeared into the darkness as they parted on the bridge. Such a powerful image.
It highlights that finality, that moment of separation that you can never get back.
Despite her skepticism, Satsuki feels a sliver of hope, a curiosity about what Urara might show her. It's like she's taking a step towards something, even if she doesn't know what it is.
It's a shift in her grief. She's moving from passive suffering to active seeking, even if it's just for a chance to see something extraordinary.
She sees Hiragi again, this time without the uniform. She understands his sorrow, his longing for Yumiko. They both want the impossible, for their loved ones to come back.
It's a bond forged in shared loss, a recognition that they're not alone in their grief, in their yearning.
Satsuki gets sick, and Urara comes to visit her. Urara talks about the limits of suffering, how even the deepest pain eventually lessens.
It's comfort without platitudes. Urara offers a different perspective on grief, suggesting that time and acceptance can bring healing, even if it feels impossible in the moment.
And then Hiragi visits too, brings her food, and expresses his sympathy for her loneliness. It's unexpected, this open display of emotion from him.
It shows a different side to him, a vulnerability. He sees her pain and he connects with it.
We build towards this event on the bridge during the Weaver Festival. Urara explains it as a shifting dimension, a chance to see something extraordinary. But there are rules Satsuki must follow.
The ritualistic nature of it, the specific time and place, it adds to the sense of mystery and anticipation.
And then she sees him, Hitoshi, across the river. It's a silent farewell, so brief, but so impactful.
A moment of closure, even though it's fleeting, a confirmation that he was real, that their love was real, even though he's gone.
Urara tells Satsuki she did see the vision, calls it the Weaver Festival phenomenon. It's rare, happens when the thoughts of the dead meet the sadness of the living.
It's a beautiful and haunting explanation. It connects grief with something bigger than ourselves, something that transcends the physical world.
Satsuki thinks about parting, about death, realizes she can't cling to the past. She's touched something profound, something that's changed her.
It's a turning point. She's letting go, accepting the loss, but not forgetting the love.
She gives Hiragi his birthday present, and he tells her he saw something strange that morning too, away from the river.
Like the phenomenon, or something similar, exists beyond that specific place. It suggests that there are other ways to connect with those we've lost, ways we may not fully understand.
The novella ends with Satsuki talking about the river, how time keeps flowing, how she carries a part of her younger self with her always.
The river becomes this symbol of life's journey, the constant movement, even as we experience loss and change.
So, looking at both Kitchen and Moonlight Shadow, what stands out are these themes of grief, of finding comfort in unexpected places.
And the power of connection, how it can sustain us through difficult times.
Yoshimoto blends realism with these almost surreal elements, these shared dreams, this mystical vision. It makes you wonder what lies just beyond our perception.
Exactly. And if you've been listening, I urge you to read Kitchen for yourself. It's so beautifully written, so full of emotional depth. As you read, think about those kitchens, those rivers. What do they symbolize? How do they reflect the characters' journeys?
And most importantly, think about your own kitchens and rivers. Where do you find solace? What connections in your life have helped you through tough times?
And maybe, just maybe, there are connections out there waiting to be made that could bring you healing and hope when you least expect it.